Welcome to Redirect, Immigration Law and Perspectives. I'm your host, Stephen Robbins, joined by co-host and fellow immigration attorney, Matthew Archambault.
Even you're in a Muhammad Ali training camp t-shirt.
This is my
Did you go to Muhammad Ali training camp in Deer Lake, Pennsylvania?
No,
I
didn't. It's like a pretend vintage shirt.
Oh, okay.
Right, one of those. So, look, one thing that the Biden administration has been doing is continuing with the Trump administration practice of dropping huge news, usually right after we record. And in this case, it wasn't right after we recorded, but we did talk last week about how there have been some changes, some good changes about prosecutorial discretion, allowing ICE attorneys to do something other than just go to a court and oppose, which has been their position for the last 4 years. And so we talked a little bit about that, but there was one thing that was missing, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And that was that they were allowed to stipulate or agree to certain things, but that the law still sucked because the attorneys general, right?
What are you trying to say?
Well, I'm trying to pluralize attorney general. I think it's attorneys general, right?
Okay, whatever.
You don't care? Okay.
I don't care. I mean, I don't say words right all the time, so I'm not very particular.
So the attorneys general under the Trump administration had certified a bunch of cases to themselves and really changed the precedent for removal proceedings. And what we were talking about is as long as those decisions still remain, it's not hugely helpful to have a prosecutor who's willing to, negotiate. It's helpful, but there was this huge part of the pie that was missing.
Right. We can get government attorneys to say, hey, we'll dismiss your case or administratively close your case, but it ultimately does not get the person's status and permanency that they're actually looking for.
Right.
So if you have someone who is legitimately scared to go back because if they go back, bad things will happen to them, it's best to give them some type of permanent relief, not only so they can be ensured that they're not sent back, but also so they can live their life here and they can start to have some type of permanency for themselves and their family. So changing some of these decisions was really good. And it was on Tuesday, right?
Let's go back for a second to talk a little bit about those things. And also, we should talk about how the fact that the case that really set the table for all of this was one of the first cases we talked about on the show back in 2014. We had the attorney on who litigated ARCG. Remember that?
Yeah.
Or did you forget that?
No, I remember that. Was he from Arkansas?
I was going to say Alabama, but one of the A states in the South.
I think it was Arkansas, but...
Okay, well, we disagree.
Well, I'm right.
So I want to try and highlight, if I can, with an example, sort of the weirdness of the prosecutorial discretion that's sort of being offered right now. I've got a client who, in 2013, ICE kicked down her door, and she was charged in federal court with Social Security misuse because she had invented a Social Security number and worked at a restaurant. So this was...
Wow.
This was her crime.
Did they immediately cuff her and send her right out of the country?
No, she's still in removal proceedings. So
wow, I mean, with that type of heinous crime, criminal activity.
Yeah.
Shocking.
So, daughter's getting ready for school, kick down the door with their I don't want to get in trouble with the gun people. Their guns, their long guns, drawn, they're pointing them around. The parents have to get down on the floor. There's a 3-year-old there. There's a teenager getting ready for school. Parents are handcuffed and then detained and charged in federal court. And she spent the next 7 or 8 years in removal proceedings, facing the possibility of being deported, all because of the crime of making up, not stealing, not borrowing, but making up a number and pretending like it was her social so that she could work at a restaurant. Okay. So her final hearing is coming up. It's a cancellation of removal case. If we win, she gets a green card. And if we lose, then she could be ordered removed and we'd have to appeal. It's a pretty strong case, I think. We're doing everything we can to win. And ICE calls to see if we'd be interested in prosecutorial discretion, quote unquote, in the form of having the case dismissed. And here's the thing. When she was placed in removal proceedings, she was able to get a work permit and a social, which cured the problem, the reason why the ICE officers kicked down her door in the first place. So now she has a social, she has a work permit. At least that part of her psyche is put to rest. She's not going to be forcibly arrested and charged in federal court for working with a made up social or without a work permit. 8 years later, ICE is saying, hey, what if we just had this lady go back to being undocumented? To the situation she was in before we kicked down her door. And everyone knows what that would mean. She would lose her work permit and she would be working without permission. And so there's a kind of absurdity to some of the forms of prosecutorial discretion that are being offered up. And especially for somebody who psychologically has gone through this, to tell them hey, would you want to go back to the way it was before? And maybe your door will get kicked down again at any moment. We can't tell you when that will be. But I was appreciative of the phone call. And I'm glad that we're back to having conversations with ICE. But again, it's this is.
But also, so I have this case coming up on Monday. This guy is 65 years old. He's been a lawful permanent resident for 38 years. 30 years ago, he was arrested and pled guilty to possession with the intent to distribute a small amount of cocaine. He was in a bodega in Brooklyn. The cops came in and they arrested everyone. They were all Dominicans. They didn't find any drugs on anybody, but apparently it was some type of sting or setup. His lawyer said, listen, you're not going to do any time. You'll just do 5 years of probation. It's not a big deal. So he pled guilty. Okay. Even if you want to think the worst, right? He did 5 years probation.
Go ahead and assume he was selling a little bit of drugs.
Whatever.
Sure.
30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Okay. And since that time, he has no other problems. Married to a U.S. citizen, has 3 grown U.S. citizen children.
He has a green card?
Yeah.
And he had one at the time?
He had one at the time.
Okay.
And he's been a permanent resident 38 years. And now married to a U.S. citizen, 3 U.S. citizen children, all grown. 2 U.S. citizen grandchildren. He's worked steadily the entire time he's been here, always legally, tax compliant and all that, owns a home. So I reached out to the government, and it's something called 212C, form of relief, where you basically have to show that you're a better guy than a bad guy. It's all discretionary. So I asked if, hey, could you just stipulate to relief, and then we can be in and out of there on Monday? And she says, I can't stipulate to relief. However, I don't have many concerns about the case. I mean, what? I emailed her back and I'm like, I can't wait till I have a case that you guys can stipulate to, because I don't know what it looks like.
What it would be. Yeah. We have this thing. This is getting a little bit.
I mean, by the way, this case would have been easy when Trump was president.
Right.
So this is not something that's really been effective. I guess means even a really question in is how effective this is going to be.
And sometimes there's this nodding and winking that goes on in immigration court. It's always been the case. I remember the attorney who hired me at a law school sort of explaining, if you can get the government to indicate to the judge that they won't appeal, a lot of judges will take that as if it were a stipulation. But they're not saying the S word, stipulate. We're not agreeing to relief. We're just telling the judge we won't appeal. And I'm seeing some of that too. You and I have talked about this. I've got a case coming up where the government won't stipulate. They won't say the word, but they're willing to indicate that they won't appeal. And then it's, I guess, up to the judge to take that as they will, right? But it's annoying. I guess, theoretically, if an ICE attorney goes to court and they say the word stipulate, it gets recorded somewhere and their supervisor can, I don't know, be mad at them for saying that word.
I just had a case on Tuesday in Baltimore where at the end, the DHS attorney, the judge asked him, he has witnesses. Do you want to hear from them? What are you thinking? And he kind of gave a pretty good closing that I would give about why she fit into this particular social group, my client. And the judge said, well, it sounds like to me that you're kind of convinced that she should be granted. And he says, well, I can't say that. I just defer to the court. And the judge is like, you know what? You just made the argument that she deserves to be granted. So I'm just going to grant the case. But what is that game? And maybe if there's a government attorney that listens to the show, maybe you can contact us anonymously and say, this is why. But their goal should not be to win the case, right? Their goal should be to evaluate if the person is eligible for relief and they're worthy of getting that relief, discretionary or whatnot. That should be their goal. So if they have someone in front of them who they think, oh, wait, they fit all these parameters and they should be given relief, there shouldn't be any issue with them putting that on the record. And I'm sure that you've had trial attorneys who have done such.
Right.
But there does seem recently to be a reluctance to do so.
I had a government attorney tell me once that he tried to do the wink and the nod with a judge. He was like, well, Your Honor, we wouldn't appeal a grant. Which what that means is the judge could issue a short order decision. The judge doesn't have to explain their reasoning. They can just check a box on a form and grant relief. And then the judge said, okay, I take that as you're stipulating to relief. And the judge granted. And that, according to this attorney, he got called into the supervisors and was forced to explain why he had stipulated in this particular case. And he kind of got, quote unquote, in trouble for, sending a message that was interpreted by the judge as a stipulation. So I don't know. There's something like that going on behind the scenes, but it's really dumb.
It is really dumb.
And really annoying. So anyhow.
Well, to the big news, to news that actually dropped in a timely manner for us for the show. And that is on Tuesday, after my hearing in Baltimore, I was at the train station and my phone is just about to die. And there's no place to charge it. I have to wait to get on the train to charge the phone. And then I look, in matter of AB, matter of LEA, were vacated by the Attorney General. Matter of AB, which we have spoken about a lot, is the one that kind of overturned matter of ARCG, and it relates to victims of domestic violence. This is a decision by Jeff Sessions, where he said basically, if you're a victim of abuse or persecution or torture by private actors, most likely you shouldn't get asylum. And it was directly aimed at survivors of domestic violence. Matter of LEA was in regards to using family as a particular social group. So those were two of the main cases with asylum that really kind of undercut many of our claims in court.
Right. And the reason for that is, in order to win an asylum case, you've got to show a link between your race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, and the harm that you fear. It can't just be that you live in a dangerous place or things are really bad. And so if you're from a certain country and you're a religious minority and there's persecution against that, that's the kind of protection you're looking for. From Mexico and Central America, typically the cases are gender-based, or they have to do with your family being targeted. And a family is a particular social group. The Ninth Circuit called it the quintessential social group.
Yeah, I think more than the Ninth Circuit has. It was widely regarded as a social group and kind of almost as it's a social group. Like, why are we even here arguing about it? But Attorney General, who was it, Barr or Cassidy, or I forgot which one?
I think it was probably Barr. But yeah, really weird that they chose to file down and narrow the only types of asylum that you can really get from south of the border, and not.
Right. I mean, there are some political ones. There are some, but they're But what it meant was, all of a sudden we had to try to take these claims and try to fit them into other holes, other groups, and sometimes you could, but many times you couldn't. And the guest that we had, Professor Peck from West Virginia, made a statement that she felt matter of AB and matter of LEA didn't really say much, didn't really change the law. And you can read it like that. And I don't think it's a wrong way to read the cases, because a lot of it there's what they call dicta, meaning language that should not have a binding effect. But matter of AB and LEA was used as a cudgel against asylum seekers.
Right.
And rightfully or wrongfully.
Right. Especially early on. I think the circuit court started to sort of whittle away around the edges a little bit. But, we had Judge DeFonso on, retired judge out of Seattle, and he told the story of hearing a case pre-AB that he was going to grant, but the woman was pro se and she hadn't completed her fingerprints. There's a whole process for doing that with USCIS, which talk about how convoluted this whole system is, right? Like you're going to make the respondent who's already been fingerprinted at the border most likely go through this, whatever. So she hadn't done that because it's complicated and she was pro se and didn't have an attorney. So he set it over for, I think, a month or something and gave her the instructions on how to complete the biometrics. With the case was done. He was just going to grant. And AB came out and he said that he felt compelled when they came back to court to then deny the case. And, he was otherwise sympathetic to the respondent in that case and domestic violence cases in general. But that's how much he felt like it didn't change the law. He had to completely reverse the decision he had in mind. And there were, I know, a lot of respondents like that.
Yeah. And I don't think we can overhype the importance of what happened on Tuesday. If you were on immigration Twitter on Tuesday, it was blown up with people just being ecstatic. And I'm sitting there trying to follow everything and read everything. My phone is dying. I'm trying to tweet out stuff and send messages. And we'll see the effect it's going to have, but it is really a lifeline for a lot of people. Now,
right,
we can't overhype the importance and the ecstasy that we felt when we heard the news. But also, I think we should realize that matter of AB came to be matter of AB because there was a judge in Charlotte, Judge Couch, who denied the case. The BIA told him to grant the case. He denied the case again. I don't know if it went up to the Fourth Circuit and back down, but he had it a couple times where they were telling him to grant the case, and he ended up certifying it back to the BIA, which got to the AG Sessions, who wrote the decision. So there are going to be judges who they'll find a way to deny cases. So there's one thing to be a member of a particular social group, but then you have to show that you were persecuted because of that. They call that the nexus. So you can say, okay, well, fine, women in a committed relationship who are unable to leave that relationship, maybe that's a particular social group, and that person's husband beat them, raped them, tortured them, did all these terrible things. But then you have to show he did it because of that person's belonging to that particular social group. And there were judges who will just not find that.
Right. That's a good point. And I wanted to bring that up. Before AB, there were still ways to lose a domestic violence asylum case. There's also relocation, changed circumstances. There might be people who were in an abusive relationship and then they moved to another part of the country and they lived there for a year and a half without incident. And then they came to the US to seek asylum. And a judge might find in a case like that, look, you relocated, the threat stopped, you're now safe. You proved both changed circumstances. Maybe the husband is now the partner is now in another committed relationship and has ignored her. I remember when ARCG first came out, we played a clip from Fox News. I think it was on Neil Cavuto, where the guest from some hate group was saying, oh, now all you got to do is go and say, I was abused and everybody's going to get asylum. And that just wasn't the case in practice. It's still a complicated, long process, but it has opened up a lot of doors.
It also a matter of LEA having family as a social group, because what will happen in many cases, and specifically in like Central America, when you're talking about gang cases, is say some violent gang like the MS-13 will try to recruit, a young boy or girl to be in their gang, and they'll resist. And then what the gang will do is they'll go after the family.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so that way you can show like, okay, they're targeting the family. And because it's the family unit. And Matter of LEA kind of cut that out. So you had to be really creative with that. So that's a big one. And that's just one example. But families often are targeted. Sometimes, you have a situation where the person who received the most harm is not eligible for asylum, but their family is, which is another reason why some of this is kind of. You might have a kid who was like tortured and abused and beat by some violent gang, and then they threaten the family to do the same. And the family can get asylum, but that kid can't, just because of the way asylum is.
He was tortured
is
for a
structured.
different reason, right?
Yeah. He wasn't persecuted for any particular reason other than to increase the size of the gang, right? That's what they would say.
Anyways, it's good news, right? Because this is kind of the thing we were holding out for. And I do think it's important. We can give them some for taking their time. On the other hand, we do know that Stephen Miller has an organization. I don't remember what they're called. Something
American First or First American or
Nazi Party of America. And their whole purpose is to litigate these cases, right? Kind of like what people on our side were doing during the Trump years to try and gum up the works and stop some of these things from being implemented. And so it's important that the attorney general and the administration, that they don't just roll something out very sloppily like Trump did with DACA, that they actually check all their boxes and make sure that the thing is watertight. So hopefully they're doing that. And if that means they have to take a little bit of time,
Yeah, I don't think they really needed that much time for this, but whatever, it's done now. I mean, there are a few other decisions they could go after. And there's a lot of talk about having that independent immigration court. But you know what? We don't have one now. So I think they should really put a tight rein on these judges who are going to ignore this.
Right. Yeah.
And they're going to find every reason to deny the cases. Like something with Judge Couch, by the way, who got promoted to Board of Immigration Appeals. Like
for his trouble.
Yeah. I mean, that type of really, they shouldn't tolerate. I'm just sorry. Like, you can't just ignore what circuit courts tell you, what the BIA tells you, because you don't like it. And it worked out for him. But there's no reason why he should be adjudicating anything in an immigration court or at the Board of Immigration Appeals. He shouldn't be in traffic court. He shouldn't be in landlord-tenant. He shouldn't be on Judge Judy.
Mm-hmm.
The dude he's out of pocket. Right. And those are things that the administration can do. They can take out some of these people. Right. Every administration has done it.
Right.
So, I have a whole list. If anyone's listening, just give me a call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Slide into my DMs.
That might happen because, as you know, we're the ones that forced the AG's hand on this. We wouldn't let it go.
Pretty much.
We persisted. And
yep. Two white cisgender men just fighting a good fight.
Now, listen, we used to play a lot of clips, and then things got, I think, sort of so depressing. There was no longer a sense of like, we can have some fun with this.
Well, yeah, because people like Louis Gohmert would say something, or Stephen King, and we could laugh at it. We're like, and then all of a sudden, what they were saying was actually law. And it was like, oh.
All of a sudden, Steve King was up for the Supreme Court. And it was like, oh, okay. But I do want to play this clip. Do you follow any right-wing politicians on social media?
The only time I see them is when people are kind of like mocking them. Then I'll go and I won't follow them.
I talk a lot about my congressman, and I talk a lot of on his Facebook wall. His posts are 90% about the border, not the Canadian border, which would make sense, right? The southern border, and a lot of stuff about how Kamala Harris hasn't even been to the border. She doesn't understand. And then he did a trip to the border where they took pictures of him wearing avatars and all that. And it's all just, he's trying to froth up the Trumpy stuff. So, and Fox News is really dedicated to this idea that there's this crisis going on at the southern border. So did they send down a Latino reporter or a bilingual reporter or
they did send out a bilingual reporter.
They did?
Oh, didn't you hear him? Is this the clip you're playing?
Yeah. We're about to listen. How's your Spanish? It's okay, right? Or it's so-so. Better than the guy.
I feel good about my Spanish. And when people hear the clip, they'll understand. Why don't you play the clip and then we can mock it?
All right. So this is Griff. First of all, Griff. Griff Jenkins. Live at the border. He's on the Rio Grande and he's talking to this guy who's crossing people, just basically helping them cross the river. And let's take a listen to this.
And so the guy's a Mexican guy and he has his t-shirt up over his nose and mouth.
Right.
As I think it's about COVID. I think he's being respectful because they had other pictures of him just kind of sitting there with his face exposed. I don't think he's worried about his face being exposed. I think he's being polite.
Okay.
On that, Griff.
Okay. Here's Griff wearing some slacks and a button-down white t-shirt, standing about mid-calf in the Rio Grande, just so everybody, get it.
And the guy's sitting on a rock. He looks like he's just kind of chilling. Like, honestly,
this is the fun.
If you put a beer in his hand, you would think he was just having just a day.
Like Griff was at some point on the shore of the river and was like, no, get me in the river. Let me wreck these dress shoes that I'm probably wearing. Okay.
I'm just going to take a moment and ask him a few questions. Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Okay, so far he's
not bad.
So far he's good. Hello, how are you? He's using the informal too, right? Hello, how are you? The guy turns around. He's like,
more Los Magros, Viandra.
What?
I think he said more, which is an English word. Yeah. Los Viagra Miagra, I think. Let's take a look.
Is he looking for Viagra or
more Los Magros, Viandra?
Is he asking for the manas or?
This is like if a Mexican reporter came up to you and was like, Mas, like it's totally nonsensical. And let me be clear. I have a degree in Spanish translation and interpretation. I've spent years speaking Spanish. I can't even honestly guess what he's trying to say.
It sounds like he's saying more madas, like gang. I don't. That doesn't make sense. I guess
maybe more. I don't know.
Okay, but keep playing.
I'm gonna play it one more time because it's hilarious.
Sí.
Oh, hold on.
More Los Magros, Viandra. Sí. Habla inglés.
You speak English. That was good. He nailed that. The guy says no.
No?
Griff Jenkins, he's just going for it. He doesn't care. He's going to make this thing work.
I want to see his resume.
You probably put Spanish speaker on his resume. And
I think he got called to the home office when he got back and they're like, Griff, we need to go over your resume.
Totally.
Habla inglés? No? ¿Cuántos te pagan cruzar los migrantes?
¿Cuántos te pagan cruzar?
How much do they pay you, the immigrants to cross? Is that what he's trying to say?
How much do they pay you to cross immigrants, except all wrong? Like all.
I mean, but at least we could understand what he's trying to say, right?
You and I can, yeah, right. The guy says nothing. He's kind of smiling.
Yeah.
Nothing.
¿Qué le dice a la Presidente Biden?
¿Qué le dice a la Presidente Biden? Which is, what do you say to the female president Biden? Which is a weird question to ask a guy sitting in a river. And the guy says, let's see if we can hear his response.
Okay.
You can't really hear what he says.
Well, Neil, he's not saying anything about how much he's getting paid or if he has a message for President Biden, but he'd say that more people are coming. Not entirely sure why the smuggler is sitting in the middle of the river here. We're going to continue to monitor it and bring it to you as we get it, Neil.
Incredible. He didn't say that.
Oh, and by the way, there are no captions or to translate anything for the viewers at home. So no one really knows what was said or wasn't said. We don't know.
I know there's a longer clip.
Yeah, maybe they cut it down because it was so embarrassing. Yeah, I saw a longer one where he's trying to have a conversation and the guy's talking to him. But anyways, it's hilarious.
It's very hilarious. And wow.
Yeah, the whole narrative, anytime Kamala Harris has lunch but does not visit the border,
Still hasn't visited the border. as if like the border has some magic powers to transmit.
She's going to go down there and she's going to be like, oh my God, maybe I should go to Guatemala and tell people not to come. Oh, she already did that.
Oh, yeah, she did that. Oops. I'll look for that longer clip. We'll play it next week. Griff Jenkins, Spanish speaker extraordinaire.
I have to Google him to see if he has any other things. But I imagine he got a call from his boss saying, Griff, about your resume.
I don't think so. I think they don't care, and they probably love it. They probably love it. So, all right. Good talking to you.
Love you.
Hope for some more good news this week.